I never imagined that the night my whole world would change would begin with a tremor. Not just any tremor, one that made the windows of my cabin rattle as if the entire forest were breathing violently. At first, I thought it was a landslide. Then I heard the footsteps. Slow, deep. Each one sent tiny clouds of dust jumping from the beams in the ceiling. And that's when I knew, whatever it wasn't human. I stepped into the clearing with a flashlight trembling in my hand. The moon was enormous, almost liquid, spilling silver light over the treetops. And that's where, framed against that pale glow, I saw her for the very first time. A colossal silhouette descended between the pines with the grace of a queen who fears nothing and no one. Her shadow washed over me before I could even understand what I was looking at. She took a step, and her foot larger than my bed sank gently into the earth. Then another and another. When she finally emerged into the clearing, my breath caught in my throat. She was a woman, but she was also something more. She stood about 30 feet tall. Her skin had the warm tone of sunlit sand. Her hair so long it felt like a dark river down her back, shimmered with purple highlights under the moon. And her dress, it wasn't a normal dress. It draped over her like a ceremonial mantle, adorned with symbols that looked ancient, far too ancient to belong to this world. Before we begin, I ask that you subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and tell us where in the world you're listening from. This helps us bring you more stories like this. Let's go. She looked at me with eyes so large, I felt they could read every thought buried in my memory. There was no aggression in them, only a mixture of exhaustion and pleading, as if she had walked an eternity just to reach me. "Forgive my abrupt arrival," she said. Every word vibrated in the air, deep, melodic, almost like a song. "I've searched for so long, and finally, I found you." I tried to speak, but my mouth only produced a clumsy whisper. Who are you?" She knelt down. The trees around her trembled as she did. Yet her movements were so careful that not a single trunk snapped. Her enormous hands touched the ground in front of me, open, as if offering her very fate. "My name is Althea," she explained. "Queen of the Celestial Valley, protector of my lineage. Last bearer of the blood of the southern Colossi." A strange silence followed. A full, almost sacred silence. Then Althea lowered her head in a bow I would never have expected from someone so majestic. "I've come to ask you for something no human would easily accept," she said, her voice carrying a thread of sorrow that pierced me deeply, "but it is my only hope. My kingdom stands on the brink of extinction. My daughters do not yet exist. My legacy will be lost. I need a companion of noble heart. I do not seek a servant, I do not seek a prisoner. I seek the father of those who will one day be the guardians of my world." I felt the cold wind wrap around me, but it wasn't the chill that made me shiver. It was the enormity of what I was hearing. Her gaze locked onto mine with an intensity that made me step back. "If you accept," she continued, "I will give you my kingdom, not as a prize, but as a home. You will be honored, protected, cherished. But if you reject my request, I will leave without causing any harm. I only ask that you do not fear my size, for my spirit does not desire war." A faint glimmer crossed her eyes, like a painful memory. "What I offer you is not a burden. It is a pact, a shared future." The moon quivered in the reflection of her pupils, and suddenly I realized I was not standing before some fantastical creature, but before someone profoundly alone, deeply alive, desperate to save her people. I didn't know what to say. I couldn't even imagine how one was supposed to react to such a revelation. But in that moment, what unsettled me most wasn't the magnitude of her request, it was the sudden certainty that for some inexplicable reason, she already knew me. As if I had been part of her destiny long before I was born. My hands trembled. My voice cracked. "Why me?" I asked. Althea leaned her face toward me, her expression softened, and her answer was so simple it left me breathless. "Because your heart kept shining when all the others went dark." The forest fell silent. My world hung in suspense. My destiny stood one step away from changing forever. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. I stayed there in the middle of the clearing, trying to make sense of the magnitude of what I had just lived through. Althea remained nearby, sitting on a rocky formation as if she didn't dare disappear from my sight. She looked worried that if she moved too fast, I might run. Yet, she gave me space, almost as if she understood the fragility of a human mind trying to absorb everything. The moonlight traced a silver contour across her form, her long, powerful legs folded with a grace that defied her size. Her hands that could lift a fallen tree without effort rested gently on her knees, revealing endless patience. Every so often, I saw her take a deep breath, as if simply being there with someone my size required her to focus every bit of care she possessed. Finally, I gathered the courage to take a few steps toward her. The sound of my boots on the grass felt ridiculous compared to the echo of her movements. But she lifted her gaze as soon as she heard me, as if my steps mattered as much as any thunderclap. "Your silence doesn't offend me," she said softly. "It's natural to feel fear or confusion." "It's not fear," I replied, though my voice was still shaking. "It's too much information at once." She smiled. A slow, warm smile that lit up her colossal features. "That's how I felt when I first saw your world." Those words disarmed me. I looked up into her eyes, glowing with amber reflections. "You've been observing humans? Since when?" Althea lowered her gaze, not ashamed, but thoughtful. "My people have watched yours for centuries, not as conquerors, but as silent guardians. You are fragile, yet capable of a compassion we rarely find in other species." Her voice softened even more. I learned to love that compassion from afar. I looked around. The forest remained intact, though her presence changed everything. Even the leaves seemed to listen. "You said your kingdom is in danger?" I murmured. She nodded. "The southern colossi are disappearing. Not because of war or any visible enemy, it is something deeper. The essence that gives us life is weakening. Our origins are tied to the earth itself, to ancient energies your kind no longer remembers. And without descendants, without new daughters to inherit that bond, my lineage will vanish. I am the last, and if my line dies, the protection my people provide your world will fade as well." The weight of that settled on me far heavier than I expected. "So your proposal isn't just for you, it's for both worlds." "For both worlds, yes," she replied. "And I don't expect you to decide tonight." I lifted the flashlight a bit higher. Her gigantic shadows spread across the trees like a protective cloak. "But choosing me? I don't understand it. I'm just a normal person. There's nothing special about me." "You're wrong." Her voice dropped into a deep murmur, almost a whisper that made the ground tremble. "The first time I saw your spirit, it shone with a clarity so bright I thought it was an illusion. You're not perfect, but you possess something my people value more than strength: the ability to love without conditions." Heat rose to my face. I had no idea what to say. Then Althea did something unexpected. She leaned toward me carefully. Her colossal face descended until it hovered just a few meters above mine, close enough that I could feel the warmth of her breath, yet not so close as to invade my space. "I want to show you something," she said. The ground shook gently as she stood. Then she extended her hand toward me. It was like a living platform, huge, warm, soft-skinned. "I won't hurt you. I swear it on my lineage." I stared at her palm. Its size was overwhelming, but the expression on her face held absolute sincerity. I hesitated, then slowly placed my hands on her skin. I felt an inner pulse, like the heartbeat of a being not only immense, but deeply sensitive. She lifted me with the delicacy of someone holding a fragile memory. She set me on her shoulder and began walking between the trees. From up there, the world was transformed. The tops of the pines barely reached her waist. The whole forest stretched out like a green ocean beneath my feet. Althea pointed toward the horizon. A blue glow shimmered between distant mountains. "That is my kingdom. What remains of it, I want you to see it with your own eyes before you make your decision." As we moved beneath the stars, I couldn't help feeling that my life had opened onto an impossible path, one where magic and the unknown walked right beside me. And deep in my chest, a spark of curiosity and something far deeper began to ignite. The journey atop Althea's shoulders felt like riding on a living fragment of nature itself. Every step she took made my entire body vibrate, not violently, but with a kind of harmonious resonance, as if the earth recognized her and shifted to accommodate her weight. The stars seemed closer from that unexpected height, and for the first time I realized how much smaller my world was than I had ever believed. As we moved forward, Althea kept one hand beneath me for safety, as if she feared the night wind might sweep me off her body. It was a protective gesture, silent, almost instinctive, that told me more about her character than any of her words ever could. "We're close," she murmured. Her words faded into the cold air just before the landscape changed dramatically. The pines opened like theater curtains, revealing a hidden valley nestled between mountains curved like ancient fangs. At the heart of the valley glowed a soft, steady, bluish light, like a heartbeat pulsing beneath the surface of the world. "That you see there," Althea said, pointing toward the glow with a slow sweep of her arm, "is the Luminor Spring, the source of my lineage's power." It was hard to describe what I was seeing. It wasn't just light. It was living energy, rippling across the ground like a silent tide. A shiver ran down my spine. There was something deeply sacred about the valley, something that seemed to be watching me even before I watched it. Althea walked to a natural terrace and bent down so I could descend safely. I jumped from her hand onto a moss-covered rock, and for a moment I lost my breath at the sight of her so enormous, yet arranging herself with a grace impossible for her size. Her knees folded, her posture leaning slightly toward me, her gaze expectant. Everything about her said this was a moment she had been waiting for a very long time. "My people were born here," she began. "Every southern colossus receives her inner energy from the spring, just as a human receives air. But the connection is weakening. Our bodies remain strong, but our essence no longer responds. And that's why you need descendants." I asked. She nodded slowly. "New generations restore the bond. They are like young roots strengthening an ancient tree. Without daughters, the spring will fade. And when it does, my world will become a silent desert." I looked at the blue light pulsing with an almost human rhythm. "And you're the last of your lineage." The silence that followed was more eloquent than any reply. The breeze moved her hair like a dark banner. Her face, lit by the blue glow, held a mix of nobility and helplessness I had never seen in anyone. A colossal queen. And, at the same time, a woman fighting against the extinction of her own people. "I understand why your mission is important," I said carefully. "But I still don't understand why me. What did you see in me, exactly?" Althea lowered her gaze to her massive hands. They suddenly looked vulnerable, as if carrying an emotional weight too large to bear. When my bond with the spring began to fade, I searched for signs in the human world. I needed a companion whose essence was compatible, someone whose spirit could resonate with mine, not with physical strength, but with balance, with purity, purity, I repeated, feeling an uncomfortable warmth in my chest. Purity of intention, purity of soul. She lifted her gaze to mine, and the blue light reflected in her eyes like tiny galaxies. Humans usually shine with a faint light, but you were different. Something inside you glowed with a clarity that astonished me. I felt the urge to look away, but I forced myself to hold her gaze. It was strange, overwhelming, even that someone so extraordinary could see me that way. "Maybe you're mistaken," I said quietly. "I'm not," she replied firmly. "I've watched the way you act when you think no one is looking, how you treat those around you, even how you speak to the forest animals. Your spirit carries a quality that could save not only my lineage, but also the connection between our worlds." I fell silent. I didn't know how to process something like that. Me, a completely ordinary person, suddenly faced with a destiny far too big for the story I believed was mine. Suddenly, the entire valley seemed to shudder with the more intense pulse from the spring. Althea turned her face toward the light, and a flicker of worry darkened her expression. "It's failing again," she murmured. "Is that bad?" "Very bad." The pulse shook the air again, this time like an irregular heartbeat. Althea rose, and the ground trembled beneath her feet. The blue glow shifted to a paler, almost gray tone. "I fear we don't have as much time as I thought," she said. The spring is dying, and as the valley slowly darkened, I understood that my decision wasn't something I could postpone forever. Althea's world was fading, and I was standing at the center of a crossroads I never could have imagined. The entire valley seemed to hold its breath. The bluish light of the luminar spring throbbed with a sickly rhythm, as if it were fighting to stay alive for just one more second. From where I stood, I could feel the air trembling, charged with an energy that bordered on desperation. Althea stepped toward the edge of the valley with slow but tense movements, as if every fiber of her being were bracing to withstand an imminent disaster. The glow of the spring reflected across her skin, giving her an almost translucent appearance. For a moment, I wondered if she too was losing strength along with that dying light. It was a strange, unsettling sensation, as if her greatness were tied to the glow itself, and the valley was calling her, begging for her nearness. "This shouldn't be happening this fast," she murmured in a low voice. I listened with a tightness in my chest. "What exactly does it mean when you say it's dying?" She closed her eyes for a few seconds, as if searching for human words to describe a tragedy that went far beyond my understanding. "The spring is not just energy, it is memory, history, the emotional essence of the Colossus lineage. If it disappears, everything we ever were will vanish. And the worst part," she took a deep breath, "the worst part is that our souls will disconnect from the world, like leaves torn from the tree." A shiver ran through me. This wasn't just the extinction of a species, it was the extinction of a culture, of an entire legacy. The pulse of the light fluctuated again, weaker this time. And then, for the first time since I met her, I saw something break inside Althea. Her colossal shoulders dropped barely, but enough that coming from her, it felt like watching a mountain collapse. Her voice wavered. "I didn't think I would be alone in this. I didn't think I would be the last." She stepped back and rested a hand on a massive rock. Her breathing was deep, heavy, and for a moment I feared the fading light in the valley was also draining her own vitality. A sudden impulse moved me before I could think. I approached her enormous leg solid, like a carved pillar, and gently touched her skin. "Althea," I said with unexpected firmness, "you're not alone." She lowered her gaze to me. For a few seconds, her giant eyes filled with a faint, shimmering moisture, barely noticeable, but unmistakable. I never imagined I would see tears in someone so immense. But they were there, held back like a dam, refusing to break. "You're so small. And yet your words hold me up," she murmured. "You don't know what that means." I sat on a nearby rock, staring at the spring as it continued losing its color. "You said my essence, my spirit, could resonate with yours. Could it help the spring too?" She shook her head gently. "The spring only stabilizes with new life, a young lineage, a newborn soul to inherit its energy." She looked back toward the valley. "But even if you accepted, I don't know if there's enough time anymore." The silence that followed felt like an enormous void between us. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know if I was capable of accepting such an overwhelming destiny. And yet, as I watched Althea's majestic figure outlined against the dying light, I felt my indecision itself was hurting her, as if doubt were another shadow darkening that valley. She slowly lowered herself until her face was level with mine. Her colossal features filled my entire vision. I could see everything: subtle reflections on her skin, the delicate lines beneath her eyes, the restrained strength in her expression. "I didn't come to force you," she whispered, her whisper as vast as the wind between mountains. "I came to ask for your help. But if this destiny wounds you, I couldn't accept it. I don't want you to sacrifice your life for mine." Her sincerity pierced me like an arrow. It wasn't the voice of a queen, It was the voice of someone who had carried an entire world on her shoulders for centuries. "I want to show you something else. Something almost no one has ever seen," she added. Before I could respond, she lifted me gently in her hand and walked toward a rocky formation behind the spring. There, between two enormous natural pillars, was a corridor carved into the stone, illuminated by thin strands of blue light running along the walls like living veins. Althea knelt and brought her face close to the entrance. "This is the ancient heart, the place where the first bond between my kind and the earth was born." The light inside the corridor was even more intense, yet also unsteady. "I want you to see it," she said. "I want you to know the truth of what we are before you make your final decision." My heart pounded so hard I could feel it in my fingertips. And as I took the first step into that sacred passage, I understood that what I was about to discover would not only change my destiny, but the destiny of both our worlds. Entering the ancient heart felt like crossing the threshold of a dream that was far too real. The air inside carried a different weight, almost liquid, and the blue light flowing along the walls pulsed, with a rhythm that didn't belong to any living being, but to the memory of a forgotten world. Every step I took echoed softly, as if I were walking across the surface of a giant drum. Althea moved behind me. Despite her size, her movements within the corridor were astonishingly precise, almost reverent. She tilted, turned her shoulders, drew back an armall with an impossible delicacy for someone so enormous. Her presence filled the space like a second source of light. As we continued forward, the walls began to reveal carved reliefs. They weren't human, but they weren't entirely unfamiliar either. Giant women like Althears, their arms toward a sphere of energy suspended above a mountain formation. Their faces were solemn, radiant, and many of them bore a symbol carved into their foreheads, a circle split by a vertical line. I stopped before one of the figures. "That symbol, what does it mean?" Althea leaned her face toward the carvings, her expression soft, almost nostalgic. "It's the mark of our bond with the spring. It represents the union between the earthly and the luminous. Every colossus was born with that symbol imprinted on her spirit." "But you don't have it on your skin," I noted. She gave a faint smile. "The symbol isn't visible to human eyes, but it's there, inside me. Like a compass that always guides me back to this place." We continued until the corridor opened into a vast circular chamber supported by natural pillars, so tall they seemed to hold the mountain above us. At the center lay a luminous pool of water, perfectly still like a flawless mirror. The light emanating from it was different from the spring in the valley, purer, older. Althea knelt before the glowing pool and bowed her head in a solemn gesture. "This is where everything began. This is the first echo of my lineage." I approached the edge of the pool. The blue water glowed with hypnotic intensity, and when I leaned closer, something startled me. My reflection wasn't exactly mine. It was me, and yet not. My image was surrounded by a faint white aura, swirling like smoke trapped beneath the water. "What is this?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Your spirit," Althea said softly. "This is how I see you." I turned slowly toward her. The expression on her face was a mixture of surprise and relief. "Why? Why do I look like this in the reflection?" She inhaled deeply, placing a hand against the floor. "Because your essence has answered the call of the heart. It means you are compatible with my lineage. It means that I wasn't wrong in choosing you." My legs weakened. I sat on the edge of the pool, unable to tear my eyes away from the glowing version of myself staring back. I had never seen myself like that, never imagined anything inside me could shine that way. And then the mountain trembled. It was a deep rumble, a silent roar that rolled through the chamber from its foundations. The water shivered, the light flickered, and in the distance, like a desperate cry, I heard the irregular heartbeat of the luminar spring. Althea rose with sudden alarm etched across her face. "The spring is collapsing. We must decide now." Her voice, usually serene, carried fierce urgency. The entire valley was dying, and with it, She was too. I stood slowly. My thoughts were a storm. This wasn't a simple choice. It wasn't just helping a giant queen. It was stepping into a destiny that would change my life forever. A future I couldn't fully imagine, but whose weight pressed against my chest like a giant's hand. The mountain trembled again. The light dimmed, as if a shadow had swept through it. Althea looked at Minot as a queen. Not as a legendary colossus, but as a woman terrified of losing everything. "I won't ask anything more of you," she said in a voice so gentle it seemed on the verge of breaking. "But if you choose to give me your support, if you choose to walk beside me, my world will have a chance." I took one step toward her, then another, until I was close enough to feel her warm breath, a giant breeze full of life. "Althea," I said, my voice trembling, "I won't let you fall alone. I accept." Her eyes widened with a brilliance so intense that the very light of the ancient heart seemed to respond. She inhaled, as if returning from the bottom of the ocean. And then, gently, she extended her massive hand toward me, not as a display of power, but as a promise. "Then our destinies are bound," she whispered. The chamber erupted in a sudden burst of light. The spring in the valley released a monumental pulse that shook the mountain like a reborn heartbeat. It was as if the earth itself wanted to celebrate our decision. And when the glow settled, I felt that something new had awakened. It wasn't just energy. It wasn't just hope. It was the beginning of a lineage, a bridge between her world and mine. And as Althea smiled relieved, emotionally, filled with a deep respect, I knew